The Academy of Galactic Warriors stood like a fortress in the heart of the stars. It was a place where young fighters from hundreds of species came to train. Here, the strongest predators, the swiftest hunters, and the cleverest tacticians were shaped into soldiers. Among these cadets, one human girl walked quietly through the massive halls. She kept her head down, her voice low, and her presence almost invisible. She was known only as the Silent Cadet. No one remembered her real name. The other cadets whispered that she was weak. The instructors rarely looked at her, believing she would never rise to anything. In a place where strength meant respect, silence was treated as weakness. The predators of the academy noticed her silence the most. They belonged to a species born for war, with fangs sharp enough to pierce armor and claws that could tear metal. They laughed at her during combat drills. They mocked her when she failed to lift the heavy training blades. Every day, they called her names, calling her a fragile creature from a soft world. Every insult cut deeper than the last, but the girl never answered back. During mealtimes, she sat alone at the farthest table. She ate quietly, eyes on her food, ignoring the laughter around her. When she walked through the corridors, other cadets shoved her aside, yet she never pushed back, she never raised her voice. Many thought she was broken, but none of them knew the storm that rested inside her. The academy itself was a cruel place. Training sessions were designed to break cadets, not to build them. Instructors shouted until voices cracked. Drills pushed bodies until bones ached. Every day was a test, a struggle for survival in a galaxy where only the strong lived. For most cadets, this was a challenge they welcomed, but for the Silent Cadet, it was torture. Still, she endured. Her nights were filled with silent tea. But her mornings began with quiet determination. She never missed training, never skipped drills, never gave up. The predators believed their bullying had crushed her spirit. But the truth was different. Her silence was not weakness, it was patience. One night, after a long day of humiliation, she sat by herself in the academy courtyard. The alien stars shone above her, strange and unfamiliar. Her hands trembled from bruises she had hidden under her uniform. Her mind replayed the laughter of the predators, the mocking voices of the other cadets. For a moment, she almost believed their words, that humans did not belong here. But then she remembered her home. She remembered the stories her father told her before she left Earth. He told her that humans had always been underestimated. He told her that when the world pushed them down, they rose higher. She held on to those words like fire in the darkness. In the following days, her silence continued, but the anger in her heart grew heavier. She walked through the academy with calm steps, yet every insult pressed against her chest like a weight. Every shove, every laugh, every cruel word was fuel. The predators noticed none of this. They believed they had broken her. In their arrogance, they never saw the way her eyes watched them, the way her fists clenched under the table during meals, the way her jaw tightened whenever they mocked humanity. The other cadets also ignored her. Some pitied her, some feared being seen near her. To them, she was already defeated, a shadow in the academy. But there was one thing none of them understood. The Silent Cadet was not hiding from them. She was waiting for the moment when patience would end, waiting for the time when silence would turn into something else. She had held back for so long that even she did not know what her fury could do, but deep inside she felt it, a storm waiting to break, and when it did, the predators would no longer laugh. The instructors gave little attention to her. During drills, they barely called her name. During sparring matches, they paired her against the weakest opponents. They too believed she was unworthy, but one mistaken judgment was about to change the academy forever. A combat trial was coming, an event where cadets were tested in front of the entire class. It was meant to measure their skill, courage, and survival instincts. The predators looked forward to it, eager to show their strength. They already planned to humiliate the Silent Cadet before everyone. She knew what was waiting. She could feel the tension in the air. The predators sharpened their claws, their mocking grins sharper than blades. The other cadets whispered, betting how quickly she would fall. But she sat in silence, her face calm, her eyes unreadable. For the first time, she allowed herself a thought, not of fear but of release. She whispered to herself, so quiet no one heard. Enough. And in that moment, something inside her began to stir. The day of the combat trial arrived, and the academy halls were filled with restless energy. Every cadet felt the weight of the test. Because combat trials were not games, they were survival. They were designed to separate the strong from the weak and to show the instructors who could fight under pressure. For the Predators, this day was another chance to prove their dominance. For the silent cadet, this day was a storm waiting to break. The Predators gathered near the training arena, their claws polished, their muscles flexing with pride. They spoke loudly so all could hear, their cruel laughter echoing across the hall. "We will end her in seconds," one Predator growled, his fangs glinting under the light. "She should not even be here," another mocked. "Humans belong in kitchens, not in battle." Their voices dripped with arrogance, and every word was meant for her ears. She stood at the edge of the arena, calm and still, her eyes lowered. She did not argue, she did not speak, and this only made their laughter louder. To them, her silence was weakness, a sign of fear. But deep inside, her silence was sharpening into something dangerous. She was holding back not because she was weak, but because she was waiting. The trial began with pairs of cadets sent into the arena. Each pair fought under the watchful eyes of instructors and classmates. Blades clashed, claws struck, and alien roars shook the air. One by one, cadets showed their skills, earning cheers, earning scars, earning respect. And all the while, the Predators kept glancing at her, smiling with hunger for the moment her name would be called. When her turn finally came, the arena grew louder. Even cadets from other species leaned forward, eager to see how fast she would fall. The Predators pushed to face her, eager to humiliate the human in front of everyone. The instructors allowed it, thinking the lesson would be useful for all. The crowd erupted with noise as the silent cadet stepped into the arena. The arena floor was wide and cold, marked with scars of past battles. She walked to the center, her steps slow but steady. Across from her, two apex predators prowled forward, their claws scraping the ground. They grinned with cruel joy, their eyes burning with excitement. To them, this was not combat. This was a show, a chance to humiliate her before the galaxy. "Are you ready, fragile one?" One predator growled, his voice dripping with mockery. "Try not to cry when you bleed," the other added with a laugh that made the crowd roar. Their insults cut into the silence of the arena like knives, but the cadet did not flinch. She did not even blink. She only lifted her head, and for the first time, her eyes met theirs. Something in that gaze made them pause just for a breath. Her eyes were not empty. They were not weak. They were not broken. There was something behind them, something quiet but terrifying. It was the look of a storm that had waited too long, but the predators were too proud, too blind to see the danger. The signal was given, the trial began. The predators lunged at her with speed and strength that had crushed many before. The first strike came fast, claws slashing toward her chest. The second followed, a heavy blow meant to break her ribs. The crowd gasped as both strikes landed, dust rising around her. When the dust cleared, she was still standing, her uniform torn, her skin marked, but her eyes unchanged. The predators laughed, thinking she was frozen in fear. They circled her like beasts, taunting, whispering insults about humans, about Earth, about her silence. And then, one of them crossed the line. He spat on the ground and said loudly, "Your people are nothing but prey, and you will die like prey." The words struck harder than claws, harder than blades. Inside her chest, the storm she had held back began to roar. Her silence cracked, her patience shattered, and her rage burned like fire. For the first time she spoke, her voice low, steady, and filled with warning. "Enough," she said. The entire arena went quiet. The word echoed like thunder in the silence. The predators froze for a moment, not because of the word, but because of the weight behind it. Her voice was calm, but it carried something far more dangerous than anger. It carried the promise of destruction. The instructors leaned forward, sensing the shift. The cadets whispered, confused by the sudden change in her tone. The predators laughed again, but there was unease in their eyes. They lunged at her once more, claws raised, ready to tear. But this time she moved. She caught the first strike with her bare hand, her grip like steel. The predator snarled, shocked at her strength, but before he could react, her fist struck his chest. The sound of impact echoed across the arena, and the predator was thrown back like a broken toy. The second predator froze, disbelief on his face, and in that frozen second she stepped forward, her fury awakening at last. The arena trembled with silence after her first strike. The predator who had been mocking her lay gasping on the ground, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with disbelief. No one had expected the silent cadet to move, let alone to strike with such force. For a heartbeat, the crowd was frozen, unable to process what they had just seen. And then the whispers began, low and fearful, spreading like fire through dry grass. The second predator snarled, his pride burning hotter than his pain. He charged at her with claws gleaming, fury twisting his face. He wanted to erase the shame of his comrade, to prove that humans were still nothing, but she moved faster than anyone thought possible. Her body flowed like water, her fists struck like iron. With one precise motion, she dodged his strike and drove her elbow into his jaw. The crack echoed through the arena, sharp and final. The predator collapsed, unconscious before his body hit the ground. Gasps filled the air. Cadets from every species leaned forward in shock. The instructors exchanged uneasy glances, their notes forgotten. The predators who watched from the side erupted in rage. This was not how it was supposed to be. The human was supposed to crawl, to bleed, to fail. They shouted, demanding another match, demanding that more of them be allowed to fight her. The instructors, curious and wary, allowed it. They too wanted to see if the silent cadet's strength was real. One after another, predators entered the arena. They came with claws, with fangs, with weapons meant to terrify. The human girl stood in the center, silent as always, but no longer small. Her presence had changed. Her silence was no longer weakness, it was a warning. She waited, calm and steady, as if daring them to come closer. The first predator leapt at her with a roar. She sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and twisted until bone cracked. He screamed, collapsing in agony. Another came from behind, swinging his blade down with full force. She caught it with her bare hand, blood dripping, but her grip unbreakable. With a sudden surge, she pulled the weapon away and struck him in the throat. He fell choking, his blade clattering uselessly to the ground. The crowd was no longer laughing, no longer mocking. They were silent, every eye locked on the human cadet who had become a storm. Even the instructors felt unease ripple through their chests. But the predators were not done. Their pride would not allow it. Their arrogance could not accept defeat. 4 of them entered together, circling her like wolves around prey. They growled, their claws dripping with venom, their eyes burning with rage. But she stood unshaken, her breathing calm, her fists steady. The first rushed from the left, the second from the right. Her body spun like a whirlwind, her fists striking both with bone-shattering impact. The sound of ribs breaking filled the air, and both predators crumpled. The other 2 hesitated, fear flickering in their eyes, but fear only made them reckless. They attacked at once, hoping their combined force would be enough. She ducked under one strike, slammed her knee into the other's chest, then she grabbed the last by the throat, lifting him off the ground with one hand. His legs kicked uselessly, his claws scraping against her arm, but her grip only tightened, her silence colder than death. When she finally released him, he fell to the floor gasping. Around her lay the broken bodies of the predators, moaning, defeated, humiliated. The arena was filled with silence, heavy and trembling. No one had ever seen predators fall like this, and no one had ever seen a human fight with such unstoppable fury. The instructors stood, their voices uncertain, their authority shaken. This was no ordinary cadet. This was no ordinary trial. Something dangerous had awakened, something they could not control, and for the first time, they wondered if humanity had been underestimated, if perhaps the galaxy had made a mistake in mocking the silent ones. The predators, humiliated and furious, growled from the shadows. Their pride was shattered, but their hatred burned hotter than ever. They would not allow this insult to stand. They would come for her again, and this time they would not stop until she was destroyed. But the cadet stood tall, her fury only beginning, her silence sharper than blades. This was the breaking point. The moment when the bullied human turned into something more. The storm inside her had finally broken free, and from this day forward, no predator in the academy would ever laugh again. The arena floor was stained with dust and blood. Predators who once ruled every fight now lay scattered, groaning and broken. The silent cadet stood among them, her chest rising slowly, her face calm, her eyes sharp. It was as if she had become something beyond human, a force that no one could stop. The crowd of cadets stared in silence, their whispers frozen in their throats. But the predators were not finished. Their pride screamed louder than their pain. Even beaten, they could not allow a human to rise above them. Dozens of them growled, stepping into the arena together. Their claws gleamed, their eyes burned with hatred, their bodies trembling with rage. The instructors hesitated, unsure if they should stop it. But curiosity chained them. They wanted to see how far this human could go, so they gave the signal, and the predators charged. The sound of their roars shook the walls. Their footsteps thundered like an earthquake. And yet the cadet did not move. She stood still until the first predator leapt at her. In a blur, she struck, her fist slamming into his chest, sending him flying across the arena. The next came with claws aimed at her throat, but she ducked low, swept his legs, and dropped him hard. Another lunged with a blade, but she caught his wrist, twisted, and turned his weapon back against him. The crowd gasped as he fell, clutching his own wound. Her movements were no longer quiet, they were violent, precise, unstoppable. Each strike carried the weight of years of silence, years of humiliation, years of rage. She had become a storm, and every predator who touched her was broken by it. The arena echoed with cracks of bones, roars of pain, and the sharp sound of fists against flesh. What once was laughter turned into screams. The cadets watching began to shift uneasily. Some whispered that she was no longer just a cadet, she was something more. Others whispered that humanity had been hiding a secret, that their silence was not weakness but something dangerous waiting to be freed. And for the first time, fear of humans spread through the academy. The predators fought harder, but fear had touched them too. They attacked wildly, without discipline, without unity. But she was calm, every move sharp and efficient. She fought like she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. Every strike was a message, every victory a warning. One predator, larger than the rest, stepped forward. His body was covered in scars, his eyes filled with bloodlust. He roared, lifting his massive claws, and swung down with killing force. The impact cracked the arena floor where she had been standing, but when the dust cleared, she was behind him. Her fist drove into his spine. The roar that followed was more beast than warrior. He fell to his knees, gasping, broken. The crowd erupted in shock, the instructors finally rising to their feet. This was no longer a test. It was a disaster spiraling beyond control. Still, she did not stop. Her fury carried her from one predator to the next. Her fists and feet moved faster than eyes could follow. Bodies fell around her, one after another, until the arena was a graveyard of pride, and in the center stood the human, quiet, unshaken, unstoppable. The predators had entered the arena as hunters, but now they were prey. Their eyes filled not with hatred but with fear. Fear of the human they once mocked, fear of the silence they once laughed at, fear of the fury that no apex warrior could survive. The instructor shouted, ordering the fight to stop. But the cadet did not hear. Her storm was still raging. Every punch was a release. Every strike was a voice shouting louder than words. "You will never mock me again," her fist said. "You will never mock humanity again," her fury roared. When at last the final predator fell, the arena was silent, broken bodies lying in every corner. The cadet stood alone, blood on her hands, her chest heaving, her silence louder than screams. Every cadet, every instructor, every predator who could still move stared at her in awe, and they knew in that moment the academy had changed forever. The silent cadet was no longer invisible. She was a storm unleashed, a fury that had shattered the pride of the strongest species in the galaxy. Her legend had begun, and the predators, once rulers of the academy, now knew terror because not one of them had survived her wrath. The arena was no longer a place of training. It had become a battlefield, a graveyard of broken pride. Predators lay across the floor, groaning, defeated, their claws shattered, their voices silenced. The silent cadet stood in the center, her fists red, her uniform torn, her breathing steady. She looked less like a student and more like a force of nature. The other cadets could not believe what they had seen. For years, predators had ruled every trial, every fight, every ranking. They were feared as apex hunters, undefeatable in combat. But now, one human girl had erased that image in a single storm of fury. The academy itself seemed to tremble, as if the walls carried her echo. The instructors shouted for order, but their voices were hollow. None of the cadets listened. Their eyes were still locked on the human. Some whispered in awe, "She is unstoppable." Others whispered in fear, "What if all humans are like her?" And the whispers grew louder until the arena buzzed with unease. The predators who had not entered the fight growled from the shadows. Their pride was bleeding, their power shattered. They had mocked her as prey, but prey had turned into the hunter. Their glares burned with hatred, but their bodies did not move, because in their hearts, fear had taken root. One instructor finally stepped into the arena. He raised his voice and declared the trial over, but his words trembled, his authority shaken. Even he could not deny the truth. What he had witnessed was not normal. It was the awakening of something the galaxy had never expected. The cadet turned her gaze toward him. Her silence weighed heavier than any roar. For a moment, even the instructor flinched, because in her eyes there was no weakness, only unbroken will. It was the look of a warrior who had been born in fire. Outside the arena, the news spread quickly. Cadets carried the story to every corner of the academy. The human destroyed the predators, they whispered. The silent one fought like a storm, others said. Rumors grew faster than flames, twisting into legend before the day ended. The predators tried to deny it, but the evidence lay in their broken bones. The other species began to question everything they believed. If one human cadet could shatter the apex warriors, what would an army of humans do? The thought alone sent shivers through alien hearts, and fear began to replace arrogance. That night, the academy halls were quiet. No laughter, no mocking voices, no insults. The predators nursed their wounds in silence, their pride shattered. The other cadets walked past the human with wide eyes. Some stepped aside in respect, others in fear. She said nothing. Her silence was the same, but its meaning had changed. Before, silence was weakness, but now silence was power. Every step she took echoed loose. Dirthan words, and every eye followed her like shadows chasing the sun. But the predators were not finished. Their pride could not accept such humiliation. In secret they gathered, whispering of revenge. They would strike again, harder, crueler, with no rules and no honor. Because if the galaxy learned to fear humans, the predator's throne would collapse. The instructors, too, were restless. Some wanted her expelled, fearing what she represented. Others wanted her studied, as if she were a weapon to be understood. But none dared confront her directly, because none wanted to stand where the predators had fallen. The cadet herself remained quiet. Her storm had passed, but the fire inside her still burned. She knew the predators would come again. She knew the academy would never treat her as invisible again. And she knew this was only the beginning. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder, if she could defeat predators here, what could humanity do out there? In a galaxy ruled by arrogance, maybe silence had always been humanity's hidden strength, and when silence broke into fury, no apex predator could survive. The arena trembled not just from her fight, but from the future her fight had promised. The academy woke to whispers that spread like wildfire. Every corridor, every hall, every training chamber carried the same story. The predators fell, they said. The silent human defeated them all. Some voices spoke in awe, others in fear, but none could deny the truth. The age of predator dominance had cracked. The predators could not accept it. Their pride was older than the academy itself. They had ruled every fight, every trial, every ranking without challenge, but now their reputation lay broken, shattered by one human girl. Hatred burned hotter than their wounds. That night they gathered in the shadows of the training halls, claws sharpened, fangs bare. Their whispers filled with rage. They swore vengeance, not for honor but for revenge. They would not wait for another trial. They would strike in secret. They believed that numbers and bloodlust could erase their shame. The next day the ambush came. The human cadet walked the empty courtyard, silent as always. The predators surrounded her, dozens of them, their eyes glowing with fury. They growled promises of pain, their claws scraping the stone floor, but she did not run, she did not beg, she did not even blink. "You will pay for our humiliation," one snarled. "You will learn that prey cannot hunt predators," another hissed. Their voices rose in rage, filling the courtyard with echoes of hatred. But she only raised her head, her eyes cold and unshaken. Her voice was calm, a whisper sharper than a blade. "No," she said, "you will." And then the storm broke. They rushed her together, a wall of claws and teeth, but she moved like lightning, faster than their eyes could follow. Her fists struck with brutal precision, breaking bones with every blow. She twisted through their ranks, turning their numbers into chaos. Screams filled the courtyard, but none of them were hers. One predator lunged from behind, but she spun and struck his throat. Another tried to pin her, but she slammed him into the wall until it cracked. Two more leapt together, but she ducked low, swept their legs, and crushed them under her fists. Blood sprayed across the stones, the air thick with the scent of defeat, and still she did not stop. Her fury carried her beyond limits she did not know she had. Every strike was faster, stronger, sharper. The predators fought with desperation, but desperation was weakness. They fell one by one, their roars replaced with cries of pain, until the courtyard was filled with broken bodies. Cadets from other species watched from the shadows. They had followed the whispers, curious to see if the story was true. Now they saw it with their own eyes. No predator survived her wrath. No hunter escaped her storm, and silence fell heavier than ever before. The instructors arrived too late. They found the predators scattered on the ground, some alive but broken, others silent forever, and in the middle stood the human cadet. Her face calm, her breathing steady, her silence more terrifying than screams. One instructor whispered, "She has defeated them all." Another muttered, "If one human can do this, what could an army of them achieve?" Their words carried dread because the galaxy had always believed predators were untouchable. Now that lie was gone, broken under human fists, and the truth could not be hidden. From that day, the Academy would never be the same. The predators no longer walked with arrogance, their pride crushed. Other cadets no longer laughed at humans, their respect born from fear. And the silent cadet no longer blended into shadows. She had become the shadow that haunted the predator's dreams. No apex warrior survived her fury. No predator could erase the humiliation. And the legend of the silent human began to grow beyond the academy walls, carried by whispers, carried by fear, carried by awe. The galaxy would soon hear the story. The academy stood in silence. Every corridor, every hall, every training ground carried the memory of what had happened. The predators, once proud rulers of every fight, had been shattered. Their voices were gone, their arrogance crushed, their reputation broken beyond repair. And at the center of this storm stood the human cadet, silent as ever. She did not speak of her victory. She did not boast. She did not smile. She did not demand respect. She simply walked through the academy as she always had, her head low, her steps steady. But now, wherever she walked, cadets moved aside. Some bowed in respect. Some turned away in fear. The predators no longer mocked her. Their eyes followed her with quiet hatred, but none dared to step forward. The memory of her fury lived in their bones. Every scar they carried reminded them of the storm they could not survive, and so their silence became her crown. The instructors gathered in secret chambers, their voices low, their expressions heavy. Some said she was dangerous, a threat to order. Others argued she was proof of something greater, proof that humanity was more than anyone believed. But all of them agreed on one thing: she had changed the academy forever. News spread beyond the walls. Traitors, messengers, and cadets carried whispers to distant worlds. The human defeated the predators, they said. The silent girl fought like an army, others claimed. And soon the legend was no longer confined to the academy. In distant systems, alien leaders listened with unease. For centuries they had seen humans as weak, fragile, soft, but now they heard of one human who stood against the apex predators and left none standing. They wondered if humans had hidden their true nature, if silence had been their weapon all along. Back in the academy, the cadet remained quiet. She trained as before, she walked as before, she ate alone as before. But her silence was no longer invisible. It was louder than any roar. Every cadet who looked at her remembered the storm, and every predator who glared at her tasted fear. One evening, she stood alone in the courtyard. The alien stars burned bright above her, endless and cold. She remembered the words of her father. He had told her that when the world pushed humans down, they rose higher. And now she knew those words were true, because she had risen higher than anyone expected. Because she had broken the predators who mocked her, because she had shown the galaxy what silence could become. Her rage had spoken for all of humanity, and the message was clear. Humans would not be prey. Other cadets began to whisper her name like a legend. Some called her the Silent Storm, others called her the Predator Slayer. But all agreed on one truth: she was the human who turned silence into fury, and she spoke no words. Her silence carried across the galaxy. It carried fear into the hearts of predators. It carried respect into the minds of allies. And it carried a warning to every world. Do not mistake silence for weakness. Do not mistake patience for fear. For when silence ends, when fury begins, no apex predator will survive, and humanity will rise from the shadows.